Welcome. Going to do a quick intro for our panelists here. We have Micah, who works at Y Combinator alum and Vision. We've got Steven here, who's at OpenTable. Richard, who's from Unum. And Kyle here, who's at Spalding. And they all operate within the world of DevOps in one form or fashion or another. And yeah, so if I look at my phone, I'm looking at my notes. My computer wasn't working, so I'm not texting. Thank you. So DevOps, for those who don't know, it's a portmanteau of the words development and operations. And Wikipedia would have us believe this intersection of development, quality assurance, and technology operations. Or some say it's become the bridge between what used to be the very separate silos of IT operations and developers building the software. But the great truth may be that in 2015, no one really knows what DevOps means. And with this, we turn the first of our discussion points. A fill in the blank. In 2015, DevOps is. Micah, do you want to kick us off?
This is, I don't know if anyone has read DevOps people blogs or feeds or whatever, but the way I guess I just think of it is it's pretty amorphous. It really depends on the specific company and business, but for me personally, I think it's automating infrastructure using software development processes and tools.
Okay. In 2015, DevOps.
2015, DevOps is a buzzword, and but the spirit of what it represents has been around for a long time, and so we define it in terms of another buzzword, which is basically synergy, and operations and QA. So it's this, we're striving towards this synergy, and so now we have this new term for it, DevOps.
All right. How many people in DevOps do we have here? Show of hands. Show of hands.
Don't be shy.
One, two people, really? Two. All right.
Well, and I might argue that there's probably more than that. They just don't realize it, right?
Okay.
Because it's right to the heart of your question, what it is in 2015, and it's a lot of things. Now, I'm from Unum, so I'm representing corporate, America here. Very siloed. But we're moving to a new model as far as dev is concerned. This is my peanut gallery here. We're moving to a agile model as far as dev is concerned. So I think we have a unique opportunity to do some DevOps stuff in regards to infrastructure, and I come from the infrastructure place. So yes, it's exactly automation, but it's also continuous integration and continuous deployment, and it's a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And so that kind of makes it an interesting discussion, but also frustrating because it's hard to get your arms around.
So in 2015, DevOps is we're too lazy to hire sysadmins.
Okay, so we touched a little bit on this, but why don't we talk a little bit about some of the history, like where DevOps has been, where it's come from, and how we got here. Yeah. We'll skip around a minute.
Okay. I guess my my experience in the history is coming from a lot of different places. Like I had internships and jobs at TDA, at private food service company that had a computer IT department, and startup plant too. So I've seen a lot of different ways in which DevOps is things like system administration, IT infrastructure, and now in my world it's a lot of cloud, and not just buzzword cloud, but like I said earlier, the automation of that. So using APIs to do things with machines like web services do with data structures.
Well, Richard, you've been around for a year or two now. And
I resemble that remark.
So why don't you tell us a little little bit about it.
Right. So, so as far as my history in DevOps is concerned, so I infrastructure, right, in Unum. So I come from the Unix side of the house, and we were AIX until 2 years ago, and we decided that's expensive. We don't want to have to deal with two things because this Linux thing was really taking off. We knew we were going to have to do something about it, so we decided to migrate everything on AIX to Linux. And we're almost done with that. And in a corporation, that's pretty good to almost be done with anything, right? In a large corporation.
For people who don't know what AIX is,
So IBM's version of Unix,
Okay.
right? So yep, IBM's, and it runs on their proprietary hardware called T-Series, and which uses RISC-based processors. So we've been in a 2-year, project of getting everything converted. And in the process, we went from 9 AIXL parts to we're up to 540 Linux instances running in VMware. And so we had to take a real automated approach, as you mentioned, to be able to handle that because we have a team of 3 people who have done this project and built those VMs and maintained them. But we've used tools, and we're going to talk about tools, and one in particular is Puppet. And so we can build VMs with Puppet, and that really turns out nice. So all that together is a DevOps kind of a way of looking at things.
Cool. I just want to say, if anybody wants to interject anything in the audience,
Yeah,
please feel free. Wants to be a conversation. Of course, that goes to the panelists as well. If you guys want to, shut the other one down. So I think that dovetails nicely kind of into a discussion about the various tool chains and whatnot you all are using in your respective places of employment. Kyle, do you want to?
Sure. So at Spalding right now, we are primarily using Docker for local development and then final production deployments. Our deployments are orchestrated through Ansible, and so we're all on AWS, and so we're moving towards immutable infrastructure, which is the idea that you never change. Like once you spin up a server, you never change it. If you need to make a change, you make that change in code and build a whole new one and deploy a whole new server. And on AWS, this means AMIs. The Amazon Machine Images. It's a VM image. So we are moving towards that, but right now we have kind of a base AMI that has Docker installed, has kind of all the necessary containers running on it, all of our logging and monitoring stuff set up, and then we use continuous integration service, Circle CI is the one we use. There's a lot of them there, but it basically tells Ansible, hey, like here's another Docker container, deploy this container to the appropriate servers, and so then it swaps out the containers, and you've got nice running infrastructure. So yeah, Ansible, Docker, and then lots of glue, shell. So.
Cool. Steven.
So let's see, OpenTable, as it exists today, has a bit of a hodgepodge of methods because OpenTable bought several startups, and so kind of incorporated their products and ways of doing things, and so we've ended up with some like Microsoft SQL and C# stuff running in their little world, and then some Node apps, a lot of Java, some Clojure, and so we're moving towards a unified approach for all that. And so the more interesting thing I'll tell you about is this DevOps nirvana that we're trying to obtain. And we're getting there, but there are some hiccups with it that we experience. But basically the approach is you have a bunch of servers. We have some physical data centers, and we also use a lot of Amazon boxes. And then on top of these servers, we run Mesos, which is basically it's software developed under Apache that allows you to take a bunch of servers and treat them as one big server with a bunch of resources. It has CPUs and RAM. And then what you can do is you can schedule your individual tasks. They might be a one-off thing or an app that's running. And so then you can say, my app, it needs half CPU and 256 megs of RAM, go. And then the scheduler takes it and it finds a box that has this space for it, puts it there. And also say, okay, how many instances of this do you want? 6, great. Stick one in this box, one over here, one over here, one over here. Then, like, if one of the servers dies, it goes completely belly up. The scheduler takes care of saying, okay, what apps what processes we're running on that, we're going to take those and reassign them somewhere else where there's room for it. And then the main way that we package our apps is using Docker, and so that way we can build it locally, try it out on our system, and then deploy the same build to different environments, to our testing environment and our production environment. And so that's basically it.
Cool. So what you guys are doing at Envision, how does it differ from?
It's kind of a mix of the two. I'll start out by kind of introducing Envision a little bit. We're sales, for the short form, we're sales analytics and competition site and framework for businesses that mainly we're just catering to the sales department. The way that our architecture is focused is we have a separate site per customer. So rather than one large site, we're running, I think I last looked, between dev and production around 77 sites of just the actual product. And that's not including some of our other services like our data ingestion service, our new site spin-up service, our orchestration site, and our uniform marketing site. So right there, you're talking about over 80 sites, and we're a development team of like 8.5 guys and a half. Our CDO codes sometimes. And so that's kind of a lot, I think, for a startup of our size. So our current system right now involves mostly just builds of our product site, because that's what we have the most. And our deployment strategy is really like, and the tech stack is like Django, Nginx in the front, and Postgres in the back. And our current deployment strategy is creating a build, and that just is compiling the static code, the JavaScript front end, and tarballing it up and deploying that around. And that's actually worked pretty well, but we're in the middle of a transition now to using Docker containers, Amazon's container service for some scheduling, and then a few other things like Console for service discovery, and that's kind of where we're at right now.
Cool. Can you talk a little bit more, like what is Console?
One of the problems that you encounter is like what Steven was talking about, how you have Mesos and it kind of knows, it puts things somewhere. But one of the problems that you can run into is, okay, where are my things? Because they're running somewhere, but I need to know where. And so what if you have, say, Nginx in the front, and you need to know, okay, I have an Nginx or HA proxy, whatever your load balancer server is. You need to know where are service A and service B and route correctly to that. So a tool like Console is what you would use for that. Console is basically a key value store, and it has some niceties on top, like check-ins for and services for applications to check into and say, like, I'm alive, here's where I'm at, here's my IP port. And so you can then have a script that checks into Console and fills out your Nginx or HA proxy, whatever load balancer template, and distributes application web traffic correctly.
Cool. You have anything? Go ahead.
Console checks are also Nagios compatible, so you can get rid of Nagios, which is sweet.
Yeah, I'll talk about our tools. So as I mentioned, we have Puppet. When we use Puppet 3 ways. We build servers, we patch servers, and we maintain the security profile on those servers. So we use Puppet well, we get our money's worth. And that's on the infrastructure side, right? And one thing that's unique about our environment, unlike these three, is we support a lot of vendor applications. We don't support yet a lot of in-house developed applications, not in the Linux space. And the Linux space at Unum is dwarfed by the Windows world because we're a Windows development shop. We do a lot of maintenance of code on the mainframe. We're writing some code now on Linux in the Java space, but the majority of the code that we write is in Windows. You guys are doing Windows development, right? So there's 2,500 Windows servers, 500 Linux servers, but we're making inroads. In a couple of years we'll take the world over. So just give that. So there's tools over there too around Jenkins. They've got Jenkins. We've got a group in Ireland, and that's another thing that's interesting about our group is we don't all sit in the same room. We're on different parts of the world, right? And we're talking about roughly 800 people in IT, I think, across dev and infrastructure. So we've got this culture thing we have to deal with, which is a whole big part of DevOps, so we don't want to, not mention. So we've got Jenkins, we've got JFrog Artifactory, we've got, a lot of tools in that space. And then we've got Puppet, and then I'm looking at Ansible as well, because I need a way to get the Puppet agent on there and start with, right? So Ansible's good for bootstrapping. And then I also need a way to help with the the install of the vendor applications, which is not something that's really in Puppet's wheelhouse, but certainly something straightforward for something like Ansible. So we're looking at Ansible for that as well. And I would like to mention too, while we're on tools, if I could, on the slide for DevOps, for meetups, the DevOps one's not on there yet. There is a DevOps meetup. It's officially sanctioned as a child dev one. We're on next Tuesday night, the 23rd, and we've taken a tools-centric approach, and we'll be looking at monitoring, different kinds of monitoring next Tuesday night from New Relic. And we've actually got somebody coming in from Atlanta to do a demo of the New Relic stuff. So go to Meetup if you want to come and see that, and come in and have pizza with us.
I'll interject. New Relic is awesome.
Okay, cool. Well, we've got a guy coming from New Relic to show it off. And that's what we're going to try and do in those every second Tuesday. This one happens to be the third because I had a conflict, or actually the other guy had a conflict, but I took advantage of it. And we're going to be looking at tools probably, so we'll be doing Ansible and some of the others as well.
Cool. Anybody want to interject here? Any questions about some of this infrastructure? Yeah.
What new tools are y'all seeing coming out? I know there's been a lot of talk about smaller and smaller operating systems that are VM only based that sound pretty interesting. What new tools have y'all seen that you think are cool?
Let's see. Yeah,
I'll say part of the one part I didn't mention in the container system that we're using is CoreOS underlying as the host operating system for the Docker server and running the Amazon container agent on there. One thing that I really like that kind of floats some things I mentioned together, like Docker and the service discovery with console, is another tool called Registrator. Some people might have heard another cool tool called Doku. It's basically a 100-line bash script that sort of replicates Roku. I wouldn't use it for production, but play around with it. The same guy who wrote that also wrote Registrator. Registrator checks in with your Docker server and says, okay, what Docker containers are running on the server, and then tells console. So that's a pretty nice way for to automatically get to know what's running where, without having to write all the service discovery scripts yourself.
We've actually found ourselves simplifying a little bit in moving from like Puppet to do a lot of orchestration to once we have a good scheduler, just basic shell scripts to send and deploy. And so we kind of have our little in-house mix of shell scripts that work with us. We call them Conan the deployer. We believe in we moved from TDD to PDD, prompt-driven development. But anyway, yeah. So like moved to just simple shell scripts.
I'll interject one more time. We're doing something again very similar. We have a pretty complex and modified Salt deployment that does a lot of our container, or not just container, but just server orchestration. We use it for deployments and all kinds of things, but there's been a lot of inconsistencies with it, so we're very much liking the immutable container deployment type stuff.
It's interesting, it's talking about scripts, we're making a concerted effort to get away from that, right? Because we have 15 years worth of scripts, across however many admins have cycled in and out in that time, right? And so that's hard to maintain. So we're really trying to get to that infrastructure as code model, and we want to use tools like Ansible and Puppet, to sort of drive that. So we've got a concerted effort to go do it.
Good question.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead.
Yeah, how do you determine the tool is mature enough for you to integrate on your platform? There's a lot of new things coming out, and you guys have very important jobs. So how do you vet things?
Like lots of times we try it, but not in production. So there's enough development going on in certain development environments, within little products that are maybe not released to the public yet. Just try them see what the pain points are.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like having a good deployment strategy is key in any as with anything. Like if you're writing a web service and you're not even doing DevOps, like how do you know the library is mature enough to use in production? Whether it's a gem or a Python Django add-on, whatever it is, like how do you know that it's stable enough in production? I think like what Steven said, you test it out a lot. Look at what is look at all kinds of things. What is the code coverage like? Are there tests for it? What's the community around it? That's something I look at pretty strongly. Like, when was the last commit? Was it 2 years ago? Well, okay, that might be a pretty good indication.
What's the lowest number of stars on GitHub?
Right, in corporate America, there's a process for everything, and there's a process for that at Unum, right? We've got a group of architects that meet every week to vet out things we call bricks. So if you want to bring a new technology in, you bring it in an emerging life cycle. I mean, there's a whole prescribed prescription for this, and you pitch it to these architects, and they vote up and down as to whether it's the thing you want to do. And so it goes through quite a bit of editing to get anything like a tool like that in.
Yeah, test it out, put it in staging, put it in a small production environment, be really angry with it, decide whether to be using it or not.
Get it, throw it in the garbage. Fair question here. Well, this is getting away from tools a little bit, but can you guys talk a little bit about the link between, or the perceived link between continuous integration, continuous delivery, and DevOps? Do you have to be doing one to be doing the other? How does that evolve in your organization?
So I can speak to where we want to get, which is what I'm involved in trying to get us there. And I like this, as to what DevOps is, I like this acronym that John Willis put forth back when he was working at Chef. And if you want to follow anybody who knows stuff about DevOps, he's a good one. And he said he came up and coined this acronym called CAMS, right? And it stands for culture and automation and metrics and just, sharing, so collaboration. So those are some key tenets, right? And so the culture is something that we need to fix, because right now at Unum, and we get to get to more of a DevOps, because right now we have silos. We have those guys in Ireland who are doing the continuous integration and continuous development, and we don't partner with them much. So, but as I mentioned, we're moving to Agile, and so what I want to see happen is I want to see infrastructure people be on the Scrum teams over on the development side and meet in the daily stand-ups, so that we can hear what's going on and we can say, well, we can do that. We can help with that. And so that's my ultimate goal. We've got a ways to go, and a lot of people are convinced that we'll see where we go.
I would say if you take the idea of infrastructure as code being something that's really important, I think most people would agree with that, and that you should automate anything that you can, then given that your infrastructure is a code base and you can test it, you can certainly apply continuous integration to it. It might take some setup to get to that, but yeah, you shouldn't just all right, well, where's some code, ship it, let's go, and then the shipping process be this long, arduous manual process where you have to go and then type in a bunch of stuff. Automate that, the shipping of it, and then you're continuous integration. Or continuous integration.
Yeah, I think it doesn't. What's more important is the communication and automation, necessarily doing it continuously. It just depends on your organization.
I think some people are very radical about continuous integration and continuous deployment, whatever's in master is in production. That really depends on your business. If you have a 99.95 SLA, that's probably not a good idea. But as far as continuous integration, I think that's critical for maintaining high quality code, a healthy code base.
Cool. So for those of you using cloud, how locked in is it become to the cloud vendor, and how easy would it be to use for another vendor?
We're actually pretty not locked in, I guess. We use some Amazon, some of our own servers. The software used is open source, but we could move it over to DigitalOcean or Linode if we wanted to.
Are your in-house servers physical builds, or are they in some sort of virtual environment? Or?
They are physical builds, some running VMs, a lot of them not. Some are Windows boxes.
So we're completely AWS. We use RDS, S3, obviously EC2. Basically, Amazon offers it. All right, let's see if we can use this, and leverage or do all the work. That said, moving off of it would be not necessarily a quick process, but pretty straightforward in that because our apps are containerized, if we can spin up a container that replaces whatever Amazon's offering, we can just point to that instead of to the AWS service. Because everything that we're pointing to at AWS basically is through DNS, and so just one in a different domain and go.
And we're almost in the same boat. Pretty heavily tied into AWS, but the underlying technologies, the core OS, where you can run the clusters in multi-cloud providers with the same core OS cluster, some console, and having containerized apps, you can do that too. And so it would take some work, but which wouldn't necessarily be fun, but it would be possible.
And that's a real concern for us because we're just beginning our cloud journey, and because we are primarily a Microsoft shop, we've got some, the expensive licensing agreements in place with Microsoft, which makes you feel like you got lots of free stuff you can get. There's a big, enterprise agreements. Our first venture into cloud is going to be Azure, and so I'm in a training class today that I ducked out to come here for. So that's a concern for me. I want to do things at the get-go that put something of a layer in between me and the cloud, and me and VMware, and make sure that we can do something, and go both ways.
Chris, I think.
Yeah, so talk a lot about communication, and I think we all know that these stand-ups help for certain things, but they don't orchestrate deployment. How do you keep everybody abreast of what's going on? You do the DevOps thing, or is it just Slack folks that alert everybody when deployment's going on?
I'll jump in. We have a self-built deployment system that's its own website and service. So it's our build system and our deployment system. So you can make a build and then deploy it to any customer you want, any set of customers you want. And if you want to deploy it to your own developer site and then copy a production database to it, we can do that too. To again run okay, does this actually show up right in this weird quirky case? And so that's currently how we do it, and that's going to be very similar to how we go forward.
We have a room in HipChat. It's our platform room, and everything that gets deployed spits into there, its status and how it's doing, or if a box crashes, it'll spit into there. And then if it's your box or your app, you'll get an email about it. But anybody can see the status of that there. So when there's a lot of red going on, that's bad.
So we aren't there yet. We're emails, we're ticketing systems, and we're linked, Microsoft linked.
So we're a consultancy that works with a bunch of different clients. So most of the folks in our company don't care about what other clients' apps are doing. So we have Slack channels for all of the clients, and just get a notification of that Slack channel that a new version has been deployed.
I'm a little behind. So when you look at using cloud in Unum, are you going to be doing that internally, or are you actually looking at public cloud infrastructure?
We're looking at public cloud infrastructure with a virtual VPN to connect our two networks. So we're not going to have any external access to our what's in the Microsoft cloud. You've got to go through, you got to log onto the Unum network and then hop over on the VPN to the cloud, is what our first foray into this is going to be.
And so I would expect you to have virtual infrastructure.
We've got both, right? We've got both, but we just have a burning desire to do something in the cloud, right? And so seriously. And so we've got a new project coming up. We're in the early POC phases, and so we're looking at doing dev and iTest in the cloud, and then we're going to do the rest of the other 7 environments. We have a lot of environments. We're corporate. We're going to do that on internal on VMware. So we'll be doing a hybrid.
Embrace the future of network segmentation.
How do you guys handle security patches for both OS and application?
So we use Puppet, and since we're RHEL, we're signed up to the RHEL repos, and then but now we don't go straight off whatever's out there today because tomorrow's a little different, right? Because they update every day. So what we do is we're currently doing quarterly patches. Windows folks are doing every month, and there's pressure for us to do that as well because you should do like Windows, right? Because we're the minority. But we've resisted, we're still doing quarterly. So what we do on a once a quarter basis is we just replicate that repo down to our local repos, and then we use Puppet to go out and literally run yum update, and then do a reboot, and we schedule all that.
And the follow-up, like the AMI images, how do you, when and how often do you update those? Because I've been in situations like those can get kind of tricky, and a lot of my actually.
Yeah, so we actually build our AMIs using Packer, which is made by HashiCorp, which makes Console and Vagrant and a bunch of other really nice tools. And so our AMI build is just a script that Packer runs. And so if we need to build a new AMI, at any point in time, it's just a keystroke away. If we realize we need to do something very specific in the AMI creation, just add a line. We have some Packer templates that use just shell scripts because it's pretty straightforward. It's just a couple commands that we need to do to generate the AMI. And we have some AMIs that are built using Packer that uses Ansible and runs Ansible on the instance when it's creating the AMI. So we can just update that Ansible playbook.
Right now we're using Salt, so we can update anything we want with Salt. For like the containerized stuff, it's just a rebuild of the container. There's a little bit of a tricky problem. There was someone released a report recently that I don't remember the number, but over 50% of like Docker containers have security packages with unapplied security patch issues, and that's like a pretty scary problem. So when rebuilding Docker, if you're using Docker caches, it's a great thing, but you have to rebuild without cache, because that will launch me an update that does the yum update or apt-get update, whatever you do to upgrade those packages.
Yeah, that's a great point. You have several layers of patches. You got the base system that's running Docker containers and your Docker image and your application. And so like for the Docker level, we have our own Docker repository that we run internally. And so we try not to be pulling things from the public Docker repo because you're just pulling down binaries and trusting them pretty much. And so we try to, as much as possible, build our base images, and I'm gonna keep those simple. So for our Clojure stuff, Clojure runs in the Java virtual machine. So that image is based on ZBox Linux, which is a tiny little Linux distro. It's about 20 megabytes. So like our typical Docker image, it's about 10% Linux, 10% base, 10% our code, and 80% the Java virtual machine.
What becomes like the canonical build artifact when you do like CI? Like, is it like a git tag, or is it like a shaw for your cache version of the Docker container? Like, what's the artifact you get out of the CI build?
So currently for us, the canonical artifact is going to be the Docker container. We're moving towards an immutable infrastructure, and so once we get to that point, it'll be both the Docker container and then the AMI. We'll keep the Docker container around because it's nice to not like, oh, we need to run this, but I don't want to spin up an EC2 instance. But yeah, I'm looking forward to RPMs. Having a tarball even is fine, but having something that has all of your code the state that it was when you built it, and ideally all of the dependencies. Like that's really the big thing, and I've been bitten hard by that. Where we had this, here's our canonical build artifact, and third-party dependency was updated between the time we did QA testing and actually deployed it to production and shipped it, and it was miserable.
Yeah, we try to do the same thing. We have a git tag and a version of code, but then we make a build, and that build gets passed to QA, to CI, to pre-prod, and to production. So try to keep the dependencies.
And for us, like CI doesn't really, it's just for testing, not for, we don't really keep our CI artifacts. So we have a separate build system that does the ones that we bring to testing and into production.
Okay. So you're not doing like git tag on rebuild and master kind of stuff?
So it seems like oftentimes around these kind of like buzzwords that blow up, you get a lot of hype, and then sometimes people perhaps adopt too early. We were just talking a little bit about, sort of breaking it down, like, test it, not in production. But it seems like a lot of times people sort of take on these things and then realize after the fact that it's not something that's ready for production. So how do you think that kind of thing happens? Because when you break it down like you just did, it sounds like, oh, that's really simple, but you get a lot of people that get into situations where.
So speaking from experience, we got really excited about Docker, and Docker itself was fine for production. For local development, we were all on Macs, so we were using boot Docker, and it's like, oh, this is great. Like, we've got Docker running on our Macs, and it was great if you restarted your computer or at least boot Docker every day. But if you shut your computer at the end of the day, if boot Docker is still running, and then opened it up the next morning, everything was just crashing. It was just a nightmare, and it turned out that there was a bug with boot Docker and NPP, and it would get out of sync with your local file system's computer. So like it had its own time, and then your local system's time would be like in the future. And so when you would, according to boot Docker, and so when you would make changes, it would just like, no, you didn't make a change. I'm not gonna like update any of the code for you, and it was a nightmare. And for a while it was like, all right, well, every day we've got to restart boot Docker, and so clearly we did not do a thorough job. I did not do a thorough job of vetting boot Docker. Luckily they fixed that one pretty quickly. A lot of people realized that.
That was really annoying.
Yeah. I think a lot of people felt that pain.
Is that boot Docker hub or VirtualBox hub?
It was basically root to Docker. They didn't have NTP on the server.
Yeah.
Okay. VirtualBox is a similar problem on VMs with more than one virtual CPU if guest pools are not installed. Typical solve is running at that level.
So yeah, I think you're gonna, even with thorough vetting, you're probably gonna still hit some issues. Deploy to small areas. We're gonna adopt this across the board entirely without thoroughly vetting it. I like the term using it in anger. Until you use something in anger, it's probably not good to adopt it across the board.
We'll give you the corporate flavor. We have a process for that, right? So we have big applications. We're talking about application deployments. We have big ones every quarter. We have smaller ones every month. We have a change advisory board that goes over every change that goes into the environment. We have all kinds of stuff in place, and it really does work well. It's always needing refining and could work a lot better because we still arrive on Mondays after a change weekend where there's some problems. But when you consider that there were hundreds or maybe thousands of changes that went into big systems, it's pretty miraculous that it all works. But that's slow too, right? That's not very, responsive.
I think it might also depend on just the nature of your company and your problem domain. Like Facebook's motto is move fast and break things. That's a really bad motto for some companies. You're like a nuclear facility. Just don't try Docker yet. This decade, maybe. That seriously might be the answer for some companies.
Yeah. In the back here.
Did you guys have any issues with the speed of Docker and VirtualBox your corporate folders and like requests taking 45 seconds to a minute to just refresh the page?
Yes. Yes. I've seen a Rails app take minutes to load the homepage.
Are there any
Yes.
good solutions other than Google DevOps?
Yes. There are so NFS, yeah, there are a lot of options out there. NFS shares go a long way. Yeah, that's probably the easiest solution. Yeah. Yeah, we have some developers that run Vagrant and then they run Docker in Vagrant and use Vagrant shared folders to then use Docker and then Docker Compose so that like they're sharing a folder with Vagrant, which is sharing a folder with Docker.
Yeah.
Not complicated.
Doesn't sound fun.
No.
Another way I get around with that occasionally is SSHFS. A decent way to do it if you tweak the config enough so that it's not just as slow as virtualization.
What about just running on Xbox?
Yeah. Boot camp your laptop to
Also an option.
does make it awesome.
VMware actually is another option. VMware is way better at file sharing than VirtualBox.
I think we've got time for like one really quick question.
Is Docker going to get ported to the .NET Cloud?
When I go back, I'll ask him, but I haven't heard that yet so far.
It will be included in the next version of Windows Server, like the Windows version.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh man, returning those real answers.
All right. Thank you guys for coming. A round of applause for our panelists.